Let me get you talking about climate again, but this time in terms of and to put on your former EPA administrator hat on this one, because the extreme weather around the country and the world it disproportionately hits vulnerable communities and disadvantaged communities. Talk about the connection between the two.
Well, sure. I mean, it's everything from what we call fence line communities, oftentimes the land that was most prone to flood or the areas that were least likely to be arable, to be able to grow crops, were given to those parts of society which had been marginalized. And in the past, that marginalization was official and government sanctioned, and it was in the form of segregation and in many cases, redlining. So it's not an accident that the home I grew up in when I was just a few years old, maybe I think 5 or 6, was devastated by Hurricane Betsy in New Orleans. And then fast forward to 2005, that same home was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. So communities live with those kinds of zoning and land use decisions. And as the weather gets wetter or hotter, communities in what we call the global south are going to suffer the most. Island communities, communities on shorelines are going to suffer. Communities in the lowlands, a lot of times in our neighborhoods, we hear about the other side of the track and the lowlands. Those lands are low because they weren't as desirable because they can flood more easily. And whenever I see, as we're seeing today, people who are going through the horror of flooding, I immediately am transported back to New Orleans and realizing what that devastation means to a community. It is devastating. Yes, you can rebuild, but what it does to destroy ownership and wealth, which is so important in our society, is devastating. I'm not even going to get into fence line communities and people who live nearby major polluting industries who oftentimes bear the brunt health wise of the air pollution and water pollution and sometimes land pollution that are a result. That is why, in my opinion, any solution for climate has to include equity. If it doesn't include equity and justice, if those communities are not engaged in the solutions and they're also not engaged in getting the jobs and opportunity of the green economy, then it's not a solution because it's still leaving out communities who eventually are not going to be able to continue to bear that burden.